All right, so this week we are going to be talking about reading and writing critically. Last week we talked about the research. This week we're going to talk about how are we reading texts, and as we get into more specific things like poetry and short story and drama and film, I'm going to be breaking that open and what we look for within those particular types of works. But first, I gotta give you some information on how that's gonna look throughout class and what I expect from you as a student when you're reading the work. Okay? So you're gonna notice that under our Art of Reading and Writing Critically module, week 2 here, you're going to see that's this week's vocabulary. There's a lot of vocabulary, but the cool thing is, one, it's all the bolded words. You see them all in there. And then the reason why we're using these is for you to show me your understanding of the material when you do your reading response. Okay? Okay, so let's get into it fast and quick. The goal here is when you are reading the work, I want you to be engaged in the work and not just mindlessly reading it. And if you're like me, and I don't know, students every semester at some point, they tell me I have ADHD or ADD or whatever. And you know what? I don't know. I haven't been tested. Y'all might be right. But because of that, I'm thinking this might be why there are sometimes I have trouble with paying attention. I'll start reading and I'll be halfway through a book and like realize I didn't pay attention to any of the reading. I was like, wow, how did I just get through half this book? I don't remember any of it. That's when I need to go back and pay attention to reading critically. Okay. The biggest thing is as we're reading critically, it's not just understanding what the reading was about, but it is about asking questions. When we get these books in these readings, whether it's poems, even films, we want to look at these with a critical eye. We will talk about critical approaches next, but our biggest thing now is how does it look to be in a book critically, or whether we're reading or writing critically. Concepts of critical reading. All right, we have active engagement, evaluation of sources, contextualization, and synthesis. I know you're looking at me going, oh my God, what are you saying? Let me break it down for you. Okay. When we talk about active engagement, we are considering how we are having an active participation within the reading. That means we're not just reading, just like absorbing it passively and not paying attention, but we're engaging with the work by asking questions or making inferences or even identifying key arguments within the work. The cool thing is we start with poetry, and because it's poetry, it's going to change the way you look at work because you're going to look at it and going, oh wait, what was the intent behind these line breaks? What was the intent of using this particular image with and talk about images versus this, or a lack of certain words? Like when we talk about, this my favorite poem is William Carlos Williams, The Red Wheelbarrow. When we look at how simple this poem is, we have to ask, like, why did you only use such simple colors and simple words and simple lines? Like, what was the intent? So instead of just mindlessly reading it, we're looking into going, there's always intention behind the work. What was it? That's what you want to do. So when we talk about active engagement in a work, you should always be asking yourself, I wonder why they have the character doing this. I think someone told me recently, like, there's a new Twilight book that came out that came from Edward's point of view, right? And that kind of blows my mind because then you get to see kind of like why in the first few books, why did they have this point of view? Why are they going through Edwards now? What's the point of that? And then as you get further, you see why. Okay. I don't know. I'm trying to think of books that might help. Okay, so evaluation of sources. I've talked about this in last week. I want you to be mindful in the sources that you are using. You're not just Google. It's the first one. I think it works. I like the title. That's not how it works in this particular class. That's not how it works in majority of my classes when it comes to research. Your goal here is to figure out who's the author and why do we give them credit. Like why are, like when we think about like me as a teacher, well, why would I listen to you? Well, I've been teaching since 2005. I have multiple masters, I have some experience in this, right? So I think you could say that I have, some credibility here in what it is I do. And that's what you want to look for in the authors in your research. You want to make sure you find the relevance of the evidence that you're getting. Like, how did they get this information? Where's the study behind that? Where is the real information? I really want you to be critical with your research, not just for like me, but for you, for the fact that you can say, I can stand by this because I legitimately looked at this source and I can say it's bona fide and it's not, I don't know. I don't really have that kind of stuff in my class, but it's not backed by Pepsi or whatever, right? You were very mindful about the research that you got. You also want to make sure that it has logical consistency, like it makes logical sense. It's not, what is going on over here, right? Sometimes you get information, you're like, you feel a little gaslighted, I guess is the word. If you're feeling that way, it's probably not the right source. Go ahead and go back and try something else when it comes to trying to make points with your argument. I guess that's the best way I could put it. Contextualization. Okay, you want to make sure that you're considering the type of context in which the work was written. You want to make sure the cultural, the historical, any kind of social influences that shaped the particular work. Like I just was talking about Hard Times by Charles Dickens. We'll go into a little bit deeper of, the social context in which this was written. Why? What? Ooh, okay. I'll give you more on that when we talk about critical approaches next week. But these are things when we talk about contextualization, that's what you want. What's the historical? What is the social? And what's the cultural context in which something was written, right? When you start to ask these questions, that is a part of active engagement, okay? And now synthesis goes beyond understanding a single text. Critical reading encourages synthesizing information across multiple texts. So when you're doing your research and you're applying it to your book, this is you synthesizing. This is when you're taking that information that you have, or maybe connections to other books. I'm trying to think what else would cross over with Hard Times. My brain's blanking a little bit, but when you're taking other works and connecting them in some way, whether it's the research or other people's work within that time frame, maybe there's other contradictions, or maybe there's certain overarching themes that you see. That's the synthesis, right? That's what you're ultimately trying to do when you are reading critically. Ta-da! There you go. Okay, so now that is when you're reading. Let's talk really quick about writing critically. And again, in majority, like all my other classes, when we talk about writing, we are talking about having a clear thesis or argumentation or argument, or like in my English too, I'm like, what is the question you're trying to answer? That's what I ask. I'm like, I want you to have a big question. How are you going to answer it? And you'll notice in that class, I was constantly saying, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Like, what's the thing? And I would help you break it down to ask that question. So that way, when you go to answer it, it's clear. And that's what we want. We want a clear thesis. We want a clear point that you're trying to make. All right. And the other part of the thesis and argumentation, the whole point of that is what I'm looking for in that outline. That's why I have you do the outline. We won't be doing the outlines for the analytical reviews. The analytical reviews, I'm trusting you're already going to do that. But when we do the final paper, I will absolutely need you to do that because it's a bigger paper. And I really want you to have already set in mind, like, okay, this is what I really want to write about. Okay. Again, we talk about evidence and support. I want you to make sure that you are finding relevant research. Go to Butte College's database. That's probably going to be your best bet. I guess there is Google Scholar, but it gets a little hairy there too. Try not to just Google things. It doesn't really always work in students' favor. I'm not saying you can't. Usually most students will run something by me and I'll probably give you the thumbs up. But if you're not sure, let me know. Message me through campus. Hey, is the source going to work? And I'll go, it's cake, you're fine. All right, let's see here. So evidence and support, counter arguments. The best way to write a paper is to show both sides. And that usually helps because you can say, well, this side, there's this side, but that's why my side's right. I don't know if right's the right word, but that's why I am looking at the paper from this particular point of view. I'm going to say it that way. I don't like the right and wrong. That doesn't really work for literature. Okay, so the hallmark of critical writing is inclusion of counter arguments or even alternative perspectives. That's the goal. And when we're talking about hard times, there's going to obviously be very obvious, two perspectives for this. And what does that look like to you? We will not be reading this whole book, just so you know, but it is an example of some of the cultural socioeconomic context in which you could come at a writing. Anyway, when we talk about counter arguments, what are the two arguments within that book? What could you say for either side? Whether someone who is in a lower socioeconomic class or a higher socioeconomic class, how might you look at this book different? All right. And then again, clarity and precision. Get your outlines. Use your Grammarly. Take it to a tutor, right? Like, your whole goal in this literature is to get your point across with clarity and understanding. And I want you to show me that you understand, okay? And that time oftentimes is not a one-time draft. Oftentimes it means that you got to keep working at it, okay? Revision, 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 okay? Your first draft will never, ever be your last draft. And especially in a literature class, as we read these beautiful, magnificent works, you're just going to be like, how did they come up with that? Well, they didn't just write it straight out. Well, there is one. It's a beatnik. Oh, what is his name? It is, I'm blanking. Beatniks. There's only one work that I might say that, and then I have my particular argument about his work. Anyway, where is he? It is not Jack Kerouac, not Williams, not Gregory. It is, oh hell, I can't remember his name. Oh my god, he writes The Supermarket in California. Somebody tell me. Anyway, Allen Ginsberg, son of a bee. Okay, so Allen Ginsberg's work, there was one of his most famous one, which one was that? Wasteland, I think it was. Anyway, one of his most famous works, I'm pretty sure he just got real high and was just typing. I think it was like his first draft. Anyway, don't do that. His was a lucky. I'm just kidding. Okay, anyway, I am wasting your time and I apologize profusely. Okay, importance of writing critically and reading critically. In order to do well in this class, you should be engaged with the work. And when you are writing about the work, you are constantly reflecting on it. All right. Okay, and then with that, it's important to understanding the art of writing. Okay, the art of writing is key because we don't just mindlessly write. We really don't. These authors don't mindlessly write. Like, okay, I make a joke about Allen Ginsberg and stuff. If you're in my English 6 class, oftentimes I will joke about it because, I don't know. Where is that? Pretty sure it was Wasteland. Anyway, I make a joke about it because it's like, it feels mindless in some of his stuff. Is it Allen Ginsberg? Whatever. Anyway. Okay. Key elements in the art of writing. When we are writing, what you might not recognize, but I will recognize, this is why I effing hate AI. I hate AI because it's flat, it's gross, it's vanilla, it's garbage, it's bullshit. Excuse my language. As someone whose life is to absorb and love literature, I freaking hate AI. Why? Because it doesn't have its voice and it doesn't have style. And one of the most beautiful parts about writing is voice and style. And what that means is, so the voice includes what's the pace, right? What's the tone in which you come at it? What is the perspective, or there's a thing to the work. When we talk about Charles Dickens, it's not the one I want. Where is it? The reason why I say this is Charles Dickens is one of my favorite lines in any opening book ever, and I always use this one because it just absolutely knocks my socks off, right? Marley was dead to begin with. There's no doubt about Marley was dead to begin with. There's no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good upon change for anything he chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Tone, voice, style, y'all. Love that line. I love that whole thing. Marley was dead to begin with. Anyway, I don't know why that stuff sticks out to me. The whole thing that you want to be mindful of when you are writing is you want to figure out what's your tone, what's your style, what's your voice. Are you like a gonzo writer? Like who writes, what is that? Dazed, what is it? Dazed in Las Vegas. Oh my god, you guys, I'm like losing it right now. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. There we go. A gonzo writer, right? I'm blanking on names. It's just this, of course, that's the case right now. When we think about if you were to go and read Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, you're like, oh my god, it's like right? It's that style, it's that voice. A lot of times when you hear gonzo writing, gonzo journalism, that's where they're pulling it from. Okay. To try and find your voice, to try and find your style, it's going to take some self-reflection, and it's going to take time, and it's going to take experience. So write a lot, and you will in this class. Okay. Storytelling and narrative. We can talk about fiction. We can talk about nonfiction. Fiction is fake. Nonfiction is not fake. There's a certain storytelling that comes with writing, which is a part of your tone, your voice, your style. When we're talking about storytelling and narrative, the whole idea we want to look for within this is understanding development of characters. What's the plot? What's the ultimate argument that's being made? We want to be able to see how is this narrative, how is this storytelling, capturing your audience. How is it doing that? Again, just that line alone, and that's one thing you'll hear often about. The most important part of a book is like the first sentence. Okay, that's how you are beginning to show what the story will be about, what the narrative is going to be about. When we talk about introductions, this is why it's important that you put a good thesis. You really, hook our attention. It doesn't always have to be necessarily a hook, but something that's going to show us like, oh, I want to hear more. That's our goal. We're going to talk about imagery and language more so when we talk about poetry, but imagery and language do go hand in hand. Toni Morrison is wildly lyrical. And lyrical in the sense of the images that she uses, the language in which she speaks. She also uses a certain type of vernacular within her work that creates, again, it's going to give you that style, it's going to give you that voice, but she also uses it to create, that's how she tells her story, is through her images and through her language. I could keep reading all these books if I had more time, but I know you guys are like, oh my god, stop reading, I'll read it myself. We'll get there. If you want, I will give you more. They're fantastic. So language is defined as the use of metaphors and symbolism and sometimes deceptive language, like we're trying to figure out where are we, what's happening, right? And when you're using certain language, it's telling us a certain story. The language that and we have it in our book Wild Meat and the Bully Burgers is written in Hawaiian Creole, and the intent behind that is how we are telling the story, the narrative. Who is our voice and how is it coming out, right? We talk about Lovey. And again, Toni Van Morrison. I love Van Morrison. Great music. Toni Morrison here uses a lot of the imagery to kind of guide us into that too, as well as the type of language that she uses. Structure, we talk about structure in poetry. Books are usually linear. Sometimes they will bounce back and forth, non-linear. Again, imagery is really important because oftentimes when we talk or when we tell our stories, we want to be able to guide our audience with the words that we use so that they can see exactly what we want them to see, which can also be very deceptive. And there's a lot of intent behind deception in writing. It's kind of like when we talk about, when I had mentioned in Twilight, right, how Bella's the first book or whatever is written from Bella's point of view, right? But we're deceived. We only know we can only see what she can see. So we're also blinded by what she can feel. You know what I mean? So there's that. versus coming from Edward's point of view. Okay, so there's a lot of intent behind the use of language, and structure and all that stuff. Oh, structure and form, to for our particular class, the structure we will be using is going to be MLA format. The reason why I do that is because we're writing research papers. Okay, we'll make it easy. And structure and form for that. If you're in my creative writing class, we would use, a different type of structure and form depending on the type of story we're writing. When we look at poetry, we're going to take a look at that structure and form. Again, take a look at, in the lecture, you're going to see Buffalo Bills, E.E. Cummings' Buffalo Bills. And it's not like a poem you've seen before where it's all left aligned and all the words come this way. Instead, it bounces around. It bounces around, right? Like Buffalo Bill riding a horse. Okay, anyway. There's intention behind this. Like, what's the goal behind the form, behind the structure, okay? That, my dears, is the art of writing. I want you to take that art of writing, and as you are reading and writing critically, you're going to look at the works that you are reading and go, oh, how are they using form and structure? How are they using language and imagery? How are they using this to tell me a story? What's their tone? What's their voice? What's their style? Okay? Ta-da! All right. Last but not least, writing process. We've probably done this a bazillion times, in our lifetime. Bazillion is hyperbole. I get it. We've done it quite a few times. If you've done it with me, you've done it at least once. Writing processes that we will be doing in class is very similar, where we have the pre-writing. I just talked about brainstorming, pre-write, put the words down, right? We're trying to figure out, we don't know. Let's put some stuff down. Pre-writing is going to be our brainstorming. Drafting is when we start to kind of, put it into an outline and organize our thoughts. Like, okay, now we're drafting. Now that I got the organization in this outline, I'm going to start actually writing the paper. Okay, now that I've got the paper, we're going to revise it. Revision is not just grammar. Revision is not just grammar. So when you give me a rough draft and then you go to turn in your final draft, and if they look the same, they're the same thing. You've done no revision. Well, I changed a couple words. That's not revision. Revisioning. I'm now looking at this differently. I'm re-envisioning what this paper is. That's revision, okay? Once you've revised, like you've had a revision of the work that you're doing, then you do the editing. The editing is the grammar and the editing is the spelling. That's the difference between the two. Please be mindful of that. Not just in my class and all the classes and all the writings and all the things. Revision your work, then edit. All right. And then once you've done your editing, you finalize it, right? You've sent it to a friend. They're taking a look at it. You're getting that final little piece together. Fine tuning. You're not using little I's. You're going to fix your little I's when referring to yourself. Hinted. Sorry if that came off sarcastic. Okay. Anyway, and that's when we're talking about the writing process. That is what I'm expecting of you. Okay? And that is also a lot of what our authors have done over and over again for their work. There's a reason why it takes years for books to be written, is because it is the art in which, it's the process in which they are trying to write this. The pre-writing, the drafting, the revising, the revising again, the editing, the re-editing. It is so big. And that's why it's important that we understand these as we're walking through and reading these works, because it wasn't just pulled out of someone's ass. Charles Dickens and Toni Morrison didn't just sit down one day and I'm just going to write this and then, do it in a day. There's a lot of work that went behind it because there's a lot of intention behind it. So anyway, I don't know. That's it. All right. Again, importance of writing as an art. That's the goal that we're trying to do here, is recognizing writing as an art and why it's so important and why we don't do it mindlessly. We're sharing our stories. Oh, that's a different story. That's another book. We're sharing our stories. We're sharing our shared experiences, the things that we've gone through in life. Hey, look what happened to me. And then someone could go, oh, dude, me too. Or I had no idea. And then they put it in art form, right? With their tone and their imagery and all that beautiful stuff. All right, anyway, blah, blah, blah. That was me giving you information. Take a look at the lecture. You will have some questions after, and then you're also going to have a reading response that's going to come with this. Let me get to it for you really quick. Let me see. What was I going to say? Make sure that you use 5 vocabulary that are bolded. You need to bold it, okay? And for this particular week's response, at least 10 sentences. I would prefer a little bit more. But I don't want to like, I don't want to give you two. Anyway, at least 10 sentences. Be mindful about your writing. Be considerate of your work as you're writing. But I'd like you to tell me what you learned from, either me or the lecture notes. Regarding literature, maybe a new understanding that has come to you, or what stood out to you, and how might you feel using this understanding of literature as we start writing critically? Like, now that you understand the art, now that you know the process, now that you know how to critically read and write, like, how do you think you're going to apply that? And think about that. So sit on a second and just go, how do I think I will use this as we move forward? Knowing we're not just going to be doing analytical reviews, but we're going to be doing a lot of reading and writing. You're free to take it and copy and paste the actual question and then put it in your response if that helps you. Sometimes I like to have the question and then I answer the question right there versus trying to remember it. Don't try and remember it. You will see that I do have a rubric, as I always do. You get 5 points for the 5 vocabulary that you use, and you get 10 points for the 10 sentences that you use. But the key here is the writing, the sentences has to be answering the questions. It has to be in relation to the question that I'm asking, okay? And you need to use the vocabulary correctly. So obviously there's always a caveat to something. It is what it is. Do not use AI. Again, I cannot give you credit if it is not your work. You will find, please don't take offense, oftentimes I will give a 0 to, trigger you to go, what is happening? What's the feedback? If I have concern. And I will probably ask some questions like, I'm concerned about this work. I might need some more from you. And so just so you know, I might have to call you out on this, and don't take offense. It happens sometimes, and we walk through it. Okay. So that being the case, please don't panic if you get a 0. I'm not accusing you of AI. I'm letting you know it is being detected. I'm curious to know where you got your information, and so on and so forth. So sometimes I have to ask the questions because my alert in my is popping off, or maybe the same thing on the canvas. So alarms go off on my end. So just be mindful of that. But trust yourself. You've got this. It's not hard. It just takes you time to sit and really think. Okay? So go ahead and take the questions after this quiz, or do the quiz after this lecture. And go ahead and finish up that reading response. And I'm very excited to see what your work is and to kind of see what are you finding out of this. It's a deep class. All my classes are deep. That's our goal. Gotta think critically. All right? Message me if you have questions.